The job is challenging and it stimulates you. There are always interesting cases, there are always new things that you're having to grapple with that will challenge you. In respect of how it challenges you, really speaking, in respect of your use of judgment, I suppose that's what judges do. And as I've said, there is always the challenge of getting, for example, a sentence right, getting a decision of law correct, and those kinds of things that you have to contend with, usually on a day-to-day basis. Often these things come thick and fast. So there's never any shortage of interest. Sometimes, perhaps in the criminal jurisdiction, there aren't often as many legal points that you've got to decide upon, because of course there can be a few in a case, there can sometimes be none, and more often than not it's a jury who is deciding, of course, guilt for innocence as it may turn out to be. Your decisions are often, as I've said, on just issues of law, or when it comes to sentencing, getting that particular sentence right.
I've been a circuit judge now for 10 years. The job is undoubtedly harder than it was 10 years ago. There's a lot of pressure in the system. We're public servants after all. I don't think anybody would expect the job of a circuit judge to be easy. It's hard work, and there are some really tough decisions that you have to make on a daily basis. But the other side of the coin is it's stimulating and it's very rewarding. We deal with vulnerable people day in, day out, the poorest people in society, people who have nothing in their lives, and you're the person that have to give them access to justice, and you do. So you see people at their best and you see people at their worst.
Because civil is so broad, I think it's very important for civil judges to have the ability to be able to work from first principles, and broadly speaking to have an interest in the subject. Procedural matters, interestingly, can present a number of challenges, and a really firm grounding in procedure is really important. But because the work of the county court is so broad and includes a number of different statutory jurisdictions now, it's really important and challenging, and therefore interesting, that we are asked often to apply new principles and new points that we won't have seen in practice and sometimes never have seen as a judge before. So having a really firm grounding in that kind of approach is important.
One of the great things about the job is the variety. Every day is different. Some days I'll be dealing with a long list of perhaps case management. That's always interesting because you see a variety of cases, and there's a number of different challenges about what you have to decide to make sure that eventually there's either an effective sentencing hearing or an effective trial. On other days you'll be starting a new trial. There'll be the challenge of making sure that the jury are properly selected, that they're comfortable, dealing with preliminary issues with trial counsel, and then of course there's the issue of dealing with witnesses and rulings. Every trial is different, it involves human beings, so I see every one of them as interesting and stimulating. On other days I may be involved with things outside the court. One of the joys of this job is that you get an opportunity to develop different skills. You might be involved, for example, as a tutor or a course director with a judicial college, or you may have an opportunity to be a liaison judge or a community and diversity judge. So there are opportunities to do things outside the courtroom which all contribute to helping the justice system. But from your own personal point of view, it means that you get that change of pace and something new to stimulate you and keep up your interest.
I certainly find this job as intellectually demanding as anything I ever did at the bar, either as a junior barrister or as a silk. One of the big intellectual challenges is to make sure that what you say is intelligible to other people and put it in a way that people of all other intellectual abilities can understand. You may well have a litigant in person in front of you. And so however bright you may be and how clever your judgment might be, if they don't understand a word of what you said, it's not very useful. There is a huge amount of reading. And one of the other big challenges is knowing what you have to read and how to go about preparing for a case. And although you'll be daunted by the amount of paperwork you'll receive, you very quickly learn to assimilate it. I run into work. I run 3 miles with a rucksack on my back, and there's no way that I'm going to run with a huge file of papers in my rucksack. I'll run with one only. So very quickly you learn to whittle down the amount of information that you receive, and that's part of the challenge.
As the designated civil judge for Sheffield, I tend to do the heavier cases, typically clinical negligence and high-end personal injury cases, which is what I did at the bar. I get enormous satisfaction out of being able to resolve disputes that the parties can't themselves resolve. It has to be said that it's hard work, and sometimes there are pressures, but overall I'm very pleased that I made the decision that I did, and I would encourage any civil practitioner who wants a change of career, probably halfway or a little further through their own working lives, to consider carefully applying to become a circuit judge with principally civil responsibilities.
It can be incredibly intellectually challenging. One thing I think I find really interesting is how to marshal the evidence when you're doing the summing up for a jury, and how to distill difficult concepts of law into a legal direction that they can follow and understand and use collectively to guide their decision making. And it's, I say, a real challenge, but a fascinating one. And you know that if you can achieve it, you're making their job easier and empowering and enabling them to do their job, which is very satisfying in a job. In the county court, again, you have difficult issues of law to resolve and complicated factual disputes, and often very complex underlying conflicting evidence and background, and you're always working at speed. The thing I think it's easy to underestimate is how quickly as judges you have to get on top of material that the reps and the parties have spent months preparing, and we see things only a few days before and have to work incredibly quickly to get on top of it, which is fascinating and brings its own challenges.